Hello everyone, my name is XiaoPing. I'm the channel. So today I'm going to continue on with our YouTube subscription channels in terms of introductory microeconomics. And in terms of week 2, I'm going to specifically talk about the supply and the demand model. So let me first walk you guys through how exactly the supply and demand model works. Okay. So with the supply and demand model, it's always very important for you guys to draw a very beautiful diagram. So we have the price on the vertical axis and we have the quantity on the horizontal axis. Now, the supply curve is always upward sloping and our demand curve is downward sloping, yes? So the way you think about a supply curve is that as the price increases, you're happy to supply more and more because you are the firms, yes? Is that when the price increases, we will demand less, yes? Which means that we are the consumers in that regard, okay? Now, this equilibrium will comprise what we call the equilibrium P star 0, and of course we have the Q star 0 as the equilibrium quantity, okay? Now, one of the key things you got to understand is that with supply curve, it reflects the opportunity cost of production, yes? Now, I talked about opportunity cost in our last video, which explains that it is the value of the resources in its next best alternative usage, okay? Now, what about the demand curve? Well, the demand curve is essentially what we call the maximum willingness to pay. So it's essentially the maximum willingness to pay in terms of how much exactly do you value a particular good, yes? So obviously if you're here, they're obviously happy to pay more. As we go down this way, obviously your maximum willingness to pay diminishes, okay? Now, in terms of the supply and demand curve, sometimes you'll see a very smooth demand curve and a smooth upward supply curve, but sometimes in the lectures, it actually reflects what we call a step-looking demand curve, yes? Now, whenever you guys see a step-looking demand curve, yes? Don't think that it is a very awkward-looking demand curve. It simply means that we have a finite amount of quantity. So, for example, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, for example, okay? Now, so how this works is that we have the first buyer who is happy to pay, oh no, 18 bucks, okay? The next one is happy to pay $16. The next one is $14, and the next one is 12 and 10, so forth, okay? So that is when we have a step-looking demand curve to reflect the maximum willingness to pay for each and every consumer. Now, on the other hand, we have the producers. Now, the producer is obviously have its opportunity cost of producing, yes? So we have here, maybe here, and we got here, just some rough numbers, yes? Okay. So we have like, for example, 8, we have perhaps on a 10, we have perhaps 13, and then here we can probably have 15, yes? So you can see is that the red line showcases the opportunity cost of production, whereas the blue line showcases the maximum willingness to trade. So the rule goes like this. If the maximum willingness to pay is more than the opportunity cost of producing, then this production will go ahead. So for example, the first one, imagine this is what we call the haircut market. So the consumer is happy to pay $18 and the cost of cutting the hair is only $8. And of course, this transaction will go ahead, yes? What about the next one? 16 is more than 10. Yes, go ahead, yes? What about the next one? Well, the consumer is happy to pay $14. And of course, the producer's opportunity cost is only 13, yes? So what this is trying to say is that, well, in this question, where is my P star? Now, P star is the equilibrium price. Yeah, now clearly at this particular quantity, we're not too sure exactly where the P star is because of this step-looking supply and step-looking demand. But if we did give you an equation, then you can definitely work out the actual equilibrium price. So in this case, what do we say? We say that the final equilibrium price could be somewhere in between $13 and $14, okay? All right. Now, the next lecture that I want to talk about is based on lecture 4, which talks about this excess supply and excess demand, yes? Now, you got to understand that whenever we have some sort of an excess supply and excess demand in the market, it will create some sort of a reaction in the market, okay? So, how exactly does it work? Now, let's talk about the excess supply first, okay? Now, how does the excess supply works? Here we go. as always, we always draw our diagram to reflect. Yeah, so we have quantity on the x-axis and price on the vertical axis. Okay, so we have supply curve which is upward sloping and demand curve which is downward sloping. Now, this intersection here will give us the equilibrium price and of course the equilibrium quantity. Okay, now you got to think about it. Under what condition would there be an excess supply? Well, if the price is currently above the equilibrium price. So essentially, excess supply will exist if the current market price sits above the equilibrium price. Okay, so essentially, if for example P is at P1, yes, so we know that because the price is obviously high, we have lots and lots of people who want to supply, and of course the demand is actually a bit low. Yes, so this horizontal gap here is what we call the excess supply. Okay, now you probably think that the whole point of economics is about this Adam Smith invisible hand, isn't it? Yes. Now, whenever we have excess supply, this doesn't mean the price will just stay there, P1, but remember, it is because of this excess supply which causes some sort of reaction towards equilibrium, yes? Now, whenever, think about it, right? You go to a supermarket, there's so many Coke on the shelf, but there's not much demand, yeah? So the price level will drop along the demand curve, and then it will move along the supply curve as the price goes back towards its equilibrium price. So one of the key fundamentals you got to understand is that whenever we have an excess supply, there will be a downward pressure on the market. So which means that when the price decreases, it will induce more demand. When the price decreases, you will actually cut back the supplies till it eventually reaches the equilibrium point, and that will be the equilibrium condition. Okay? And vice versa, what happens if we have an excess demand? Well, if there is an excess demand, then it's going to be the same situation, right? So let's use a different color pen. If it's an excess demand, then the price is going to be clearly below the P star, yes? So whenever the price is below the equilibrium price, this means that being a consumer, you want to demand more and more, yes? But the idea is that, well, if price is like that, right? Let's just draw again, right? So here, the green part is the QD, and this part here is the QS, yes? You can see that this horizontal gap here is the excess demand, okay? Now, whenever we have an excess demand, this means that there will be an upward pressure in terms of prices. Now, for example, imagine that you go to Coles and hoping to buy a bottle of Coke, for example, yes? And there is so much demand in terms of you want to buy more and more, but there's only like 2 or 3 cans left on the shelf, right? So which means that everybody's willing to pay more, right? So what this means is that because of the excess demand, there will be an upward pressure in terms of the prices. Now, as the price increases towards a P star, we will induce more suppliers willing to supply more into the market. And of course, being a consumer, you will cut back, yes? So ultimately, what this is trying to say is that excess supply and excess demand is just a phenomenon, yes, whereby it is a disequilibrium, but eventually in the long run, the market will correct itself. And that's typically known as what we call the Adam Smith invisible hand, okay? So, now, the next point I do want to talk about is about the elasticity in terms of the demand curve. Now, what exactly constitutes this elasticity? So let's rub this one off, yes? So whenever they talk about the elasticity, so this is talking about the key point from lecture 5, yes? Now, elasticity is actually quite a sensitive area because you understand the home price elasticity for demand is negative, yes? It should be negative because the demand curve, in theory, is downward sloping for the ordinary good, okay? So what this means is that when price increase, you should demand less, okay? Now, the own price elasticity is broken down into 3 components. So if we look at the absolute value of the elasticity, which is smaller than 1, and bigger than 0. Yes, we call this the inelastic demand curve. Yes, if the absolute value of the elasticity is more than 1, then we call this the elastic demand. Yes, and there will be one more. Now, what happens if the absolute value of elastic demand is equal to 1? Then we call this the unit elasticity. Yes. Now, essentially, the elasticity tells us a very important piece of information. That is the availabilities of substitutes. Yes. Now, let me just quickly define what substitute is. Right. Substitute is obviously things can replace each other. So a classical example could be Pepsi and Coke. Yes. So if the price of Coke increases, then we will demand more Pepsi because Pepsi, Coke are substitutes. Okay. Now, what I'm trying to say is that if there is lots and lots of substitutes available in this market, then the demand curve should be very, very flat, isn't it? Yes? So if there's a lot of substitutes readily available in the market, our demand curve should be really elastic, yeah, or flat. Now, what does it mean by an elastic demand? So, when price increase by just a little bit, this means that the quantity demanded will be reduced significantly, isn't it? Yes, because there's heaps and heaps of substitutes available out there. So what this is trying to say is that if the demand is elastic, how do we generate more total revenue? Now, by the way, total revenue is equal to price times by quantity, isn't it? Yes. Now, if our demand is rather elastic, we shouldn't really increase price, isn't it? Yeah, because if I increase price by just a little bit, the quantity demand will reduce by a significant amount. Can we see that? Now, what this means is that if the demand is elastic, you increase in price, our total revenue is actually lower. So what this means is that if the demand curve is elastic, we should actually reduce price, which means that the change in quantity is now bigger than the diminishing price in order to increase the total revenue. Okay? Now, on the other hand, we have this inelastic demand curve. Now, being inelastic, this means that the amount of substitutes is not readily available. Yes? So, for example, an inelastic demand look like this, very steep, because the price can increase by such a big proportion, but the demand will only reduce by just a little bit, yes? Now, things that have a highly inelastic demand, for example, could be like, drugs, like cocaine, because people are addicted, yes? We are naturally willing to pay more money, and obviously the price increases. Because of addiction, we can't really reduce our demand that much, okay? But in other words, when demand is inelastic, this means that there's not much substitutes available, like things like water, the necessities, right? Now imagine that we're in the middle of a Sahara desert, yes, and just sand everywhere, and you see an XP Education popped up water shop, and we're selling water. Now, how much are you happy to pay for a bottle of water? Well, you're happy to pay with everything you got, right? Because obviously in the middle of the desert, there's no water, and that's the only thing you can afford, okay? So which means that if we have an inelastic demand, and just want to remind you, total revenue is still price times by quantity, yes? Now, because we can increase our price by a very large proportion, but the quantity will only reduce by a very small amount because it is a necessity, yes? This means that our total revenue will increase. Now, just to sum up, what are the main takeaway from this? If the demand is inelastic, how do you make more revenue or profit? You should increase your price, okay? But what happens if the demand is more elastic? Then to make more revenue, you should decrease your price to stimulate the quantity, okay? So make sure that you guys understand elasticity is actually quite an important factor in terms of determining the characteristics of the market. Now, before we finish, I just want to talk about, well, what happens if I have a perfect inelastic demand, whereby it's a perfectly vertical line. Now, in economics, the best way to learn things is to actually gain examples, yes? Now, what can you think of that have a perfect inelastic demand? Now, you got to think about things that is finite, such as the Mona Lisa painting. Yes, there's only one real painting out there. Okay, now which means that because there's only one, people are happy to pay an infinite price. Okay, and that's an example of a perfectly inelastic good, whereby there is a finite amount of quantity. Yes, but if I have a perfect horizontal line, then it is perfect elastic. Yes, and that's when we were going to talk about next about these perfectly competitive markets. So thanks again for watching our YouTube channel. I hope that you guys enjoyed the video. So keep subscribing to our YouTube channels, and I'll be uploading more for the Introductory Micro series. Alright, thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Take care. Bye-bye.